I've been asked to talk about the class notebook aspect of Teams. Now, what that essentially is the digital exercise book for you as a teacher to put information across to the students in the form of a lesson, and there can be extra links to videos and things that you can embed in there. There's also capability for areas for the students to complete their work so that you can then see it and give feedback. We've been using this in English, and I've used it for a charity project in a slightly different way. So I'll just talk you through how I've used both of those. But we've been using it quite effectively, not only to make the work clearer, but also to reduce some of the workload for ourselves. This charity project is one method that I've used that not every student has used it, but those who have used it, you can see that there's been an impact there. So the class notebook sits here on the top. You do have to create it in your team. And as with anything else, if you don't direct the students to use it for a particular purpose, then obviously they won't do that. So if I click on this here, you can see how I've set mine up. There did used to be images and GIFs here. I think maybe with the when that was disallowed and re-allowed again, they've stopped appearing, unfortunately. But that won't be too difficult to set up. So this is a welcome page that I've set up just so that the students will then hopefully read it to find out where they need to be for the next stage. So make your way over to the content library for the full explanation. So if you go onto this arrow here, it opens the navigation panel. And there are several different spaces. You have the collaboration space here, which is a space where you can input information and the students can then speak to you directly about it. It's a little bit clearer than the posts page because obviously they can post about anything else. The idea behind this is that they would collaborate all together. They haven't used this at all, really, but it is there to show that they can do it. So the idea was that they would be able to discuss their ideas to help to influence each other's writing. I put on different examples and questions to get them thinking, but as I say, no, they didn't really use that there. I also put in extra different media types so that they could hopefully listen to those and be inspired if they weren't inspired to do the reading. So that's the collaboration space. The content library here is essentially any content that you want to give them. So I've used this to set up the lessons. In this context, because it's not a lesson team, it was a voluntary scheme, I use this to as a sort of pathway to modelling. So the welcome told them the task that they were setting up to do. It gave them the basic information rather than putting it on the post page where it will disappear later. I then had my own notebook here, which is set up in the exact same way that their notebooks would. So they all have personal notebooks down below that I'll speak about in a minute. And I mirrored what they saw in their own notebook, because even though you see all of the students in your class, they will only see the collaboration space, the content library, and their own personal file. They won't be able to snoop in anybody else's. So within the notebook, I created 4 different tabs, 4 different sections. It was sort of a planning, writing, and final piece type of a setup. So here they were able to see how I was planning for my work in the inspiration. This was when me and Fionn had a discussion. I just took a snapshot to show them. And these were some of the tasks that I'd suggested that they could do. So I just created a folder just so they could see it and then use that to support them. The same sort of idea with that one. And then these were my poems to try it so that they could see that how I'd done it, what techniques we'd used, what kind of a mood I had used in mind to help them to write theirs. I also used these additional tabs to put any resources that I thought students might need and usually have in the classroom, but don't have at hand anymore. So I had a techniques one that just reminded them of anything that they needed to know, but probably wouldn't off the top of their head. And the same with the Allen Peet structures. They're things that they're used to in the classroom. They do know where they are. They do have them in their books, but they don't have them at the moment. Then in their own section here, who should I go to? In their own sections, they'll have the 4 different tabs that I set up. You can change those to be whatever you want them to be. The inspiration was what kind of things was she hoping to put into her poem or story. She very briefly used these here to get her thinking about it. She didn't use a structure because she didn't need to. She wasn't writing a short story, so she didn't use that one, which is fine. And then she did a writing. She used her writing section for her first draft. I then went in and literally clicked to the side of it and wrote anything I needed to. So I wrote all the feedback along the right-hand side. So all of my feedback was in the text that she'd written, any advice, so that she could then look at that, which she did, and improve before she made amendments and put it into her final piece. Now, I know that the idea of this was so that I could use those final pieces to essentially put them into the book that I'm creating. But actually, I think it's a really good idea more generally for if we are still using online processes, to keep a hold of those assignments that they've done really well in, or that they're really proud of, that they could create a folder within here where we have everything that they can see, and that we could perhaps then share with parents or use for a different process at some time in the future. So that's how I used it for the project. We did use it slightly differently within the normal class procedure. So I was working on Year 7. So the class notebook here is for 7S, but I duplicated this across every class in Year 7. So again, the same thing, we've got the welcome that tells them to go to the content library. They will then click into the content library, and they have every week clearly signed for them to show where they should be. So if I click onto week 9 here, we can see that they've got session 17 and 18, which line up to the assignments that they will have been set. And then you can see down here that in session 17, we worked on the Kraken. They knew how many tasks. So all of the details that would be on a worksheet assignment are here. I found that if I put things in the assignment, they weren't necessarily watching the videos and they weren't doing the work to read around things. They were basically doing the bare minimum. So by doing everything in the class notebook, I was able to put the links directly in. So instead of using images, we could use GIFs to try and get them a little bit more engaged in what was happening, to understand the storylines of these more difficult poems. They've got the questions that they need to think about before they answer. There's a research task. They've got videos embedded in there, really simply just copied and pasted in, and they already pop up. And then that formed the assignment sheet, but I obviously cut it out and cut all the extra media down so that it was a much easier assignment to view when they come to fill it out. Lots of them did decide that actually they didn't want to then fill in the assignment. They just write it on paper and send in a picture, which is fine. But it did seem to get people looking at the actual videos and engaging a little bit more with what was happening. The final thing I just wanted to talk about was that we did use the class notebook so that information could be more easily shared. So it was much clearer than just using it on the assignment for one, but then instead of anyone having to duplicate, you can really, really simply just copy this into any other teams that you're also a member of. So if I wanted to do that, so I wrote this on mine and then I share it across to every other class in Year 7, I would click on Class Notebook down here on this tab, copy to content library. This then takes a little second. And all the classes, before the classes, I decide which section I want to take. So if I was doing this one, I would do week 9, next, and then I decide where it was that I wanted to copy it into. So I usually highlight all of the Year 7s and then press copy at the bottom here, and it does it really quickly, and you can click straight off and carry on with what you're doing, so that all you need to do is then grab the assignment from the assignment tab. As a department, we've used Class Notebook across all of the different year groups now. We found that it's really easy to share the work across. It's made the assignments much more student-friendly, which has meant that engagement has increased slightly on what it was before. It's also meant that we're able to increase the teacher support, because we're able to include a wider range of instructions, also clearer instructions, because you wouldn't want to include quite so much information in the actual assignment itself, because that makes it look lengthy, which then again puts the students off. Class Notebook has also, as I showed you in the charity project group, it's also meant that sharing extra resources is really easy to do, and they're really clearly signposted. Now, those resources were put on there at the start so that students can flit in and out regardless of what the particular task or focus is, because they were meant for skills that that are across the whole subject. So I hope that that has explained how we've been using it, and I hope that you can see some way to perhaps using it in your subject, if that would be helpful. If you do have any questions, feel free to let me know. And thank you for listening.